So when I was in Special Forces working in Colombia back in the mid-90s, we found ourselves a lot of times very closely connected to what we call the country team in the U.S. Embassy. And now understand that this is a hodgepodge of very senior leaders from three-letter agencies. Pick your agency. The agency that shall not be named down on the Potomac River, the Department of State, State Department, USAID, a whole range of interested parties that were working in Colombia and that ideally are practicing interagency cooperation and coordination. Now, as the Special Forces unit that was in that country, we were about the only ones that were not permanent party. And the relationship with the embassy in Colombia at that particular time was hot and cold. There were very senior members in the Colombian embassy who, frankly, had some issues with special ops in general. They viewed us as cowboys, or they viewed us as non-permanent party members who didn't have as much, skin in the game. So we were likely to take, unnecessary risks and do things that would cause issues for the embassy. It was just kind of a weird dynamic. And as the detachment commander, a lot of times I found myself having to advocate with the deputy chief of mission, with the regional security officer, very senior people in the embassy who would decide whether or not we would wear a suit and tie and stay inside the embassy the whole time we were there, or whether we could actually get out into the hinterlands of Colombia, interact with the host nation military, interact with the police, and even kind of get on the edges of what was going on with the insurgents there and do our job as Green Berets, as trainers, advisors, and help connect what was going on at that grassroots level. And it was very challenging because I tell you, a lot of those senior leaders simply, did not want to allow us to even leave the embassy in many ways. One of them at the time was the deputy chief of mission, and he's probably still operational, so I'll leave that out of it. But I found myself having to persuade this leader at the deputy chief of mission to let my team go out and be close to the Colombian National Police, the Colombian military, in a way that would allow us to really have an impact. And, he claimed these were force protection procedures, and he was very, very, close on the risk thing. So what I had to do over time was I had to engage this gentleman day after day, day after day, day after day. And over time, I was able to actually, persuade him to allow my guys and my team to get outside the embassy and do some impactful things inside the country. But it wasn't easy. It was iterative. It took time. And a lot of times, one of the most impactful things that I was able to do was with my warrant officer was to talk to his regional security officer and offer up some training that we could give them right there on the compound, to include rappelling training. We went to the flat range, did some advanced marksmanship with his Marines that guarded the embassy. And the way I would couch that was like, look, we're here. We have organic skills and capabilities that can help fill some of the gaps that you have with your force protection and your security requirements right here in the embassy. What if we were to help you out with that? Same token, if you let us go outside the embassy and work with some of these host nation units, we can actually give you a better sense of what's going on out there, better reporting, so that you can send that up your diplomatic chain of command. And it was just in doing that over time, I was kind of able to own the room with this deputy chief of mission in a way that I could build rapport, build a relationship, and eventually get done what needed to get done. And look, that's nothing special. Green Berets do that all the time. But I want to call that out because I think that kind of work to own a room is very relevant for you today in your business and your nonprofit, as a mid-level manager in a corporation. If you can own a room in this trust-depleted time that we live in, then you're going to be able to move people to buy, invest, follow you in a way that they probably would not do if you didn't own that room. Now, let me tell you what I mean by own the room. What I mean by own the room is to be the most relevant, the most relatable, and the most resonant person in that room. So when I was talking to that deputy chief of mission, I had to be relevant to him. I had to demonstrate to him that this wasn't my agenda. This was work that I was doing that could help serve his pain points, his dreams, his opportunities. So getting out there and giving reporting that would help him get a better sense of what was going on in the country from a diplomatic sense, relevance. I had to be relatable. He had to understand that my team and me, we were humble, that we were well-trained, that we were not cowboys, that we were actually part of his team, and that he could relate to us and we could relate to him. And that came from just making human connections over time. And finally, I had to be resonant. My words had to resonate with him. I had to look through his lens. I had to think about his pain points, his dreams, and I had to really choose how I framed things with him so that they landed on his chest cavity and they resonated. A lot of narrative, a lot of storytelling, a lot of active listening. All of these things are skills. Some of us do them instinctively. In fact, all of us do these things instinctively at times because we're social creatures. But in today's high stakes, low trust environment, we need to do them more than 90% of the time if we're gonna be strategic and if we're gonna have the effect we want. That means we have to own the room. We have to be more relevant, more relatable, more resonant than anyone else in there. You may not be the most senior, you may not be the most experienced, right? But you are the most relevant, the most relatable, the most resonant. So over the next month and a half, I'm gonna give you some best practices, some insights that I learned off the battlefield and as in my time as a Green Beret, both through my own experiences and more importantly through the wonderful special ops guys that I served with, on ways that you can own the room and you can apply that in your life. Just recently, one of my coaching students, Josh, took the skills that I taught him through Rooftop Leadership to a big financial advisor conference, and he shared the lessons that he had learned, he and his dad had learned in growing their practice with these financial advisors. And what Josh focused on was being relevant to them, to making sure that he spoke to their pain, their dreams. He focused on being relatable. He told lots of stories that were from his dad and for him, that people saw him as a husband, a father, not just this successful financial advisor, and his words resonated. He thought deeply about the stories that he told, the examples that he gave, because he wanted them to really land on the chest cavity of his audience. And as a result, was one of the highest rated speeches in that entire conference. They've asked him back, and Josh just continues to climb and climb and climb by taking the time to own the room. You can do the very same thing with a lot of the best practices that I'm going to give you over the next few weeks. So that's going to be our theme in the Rooftop Rally Point for the rest of the year, actually. We're going to go all the way through November, up into December, and I'm going to give you best practices and tips that you can use to own every room you walk into. And don't forget, our Rooftop Live is coming up in the spring where you can go even deeper on this stuff. April 3, 4, and 5 here in Tampa, Florida. You're not going to want to miss that, so be looking for that to be posted soon. All right, thanks for what you do. Can't wait to get into this series of Own the Room, and I'll see you on the rooftop.